Everybody that's listening, we have a very, very good interview here. And I'm not just saying that because I say that a lot, but I'm saying this guy is a man that's standing up for people, and he's an extremely great doctor. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the medical field right now about preventing death and how the medical field has changed, especially in the past couple years. This is Dr. Thomas Hemingway. He's usually coming to us from Hawaii. Now he's in a different state, and we'll maybe talk about that. He's a surfer. He's got his own podcast. We're going to tease all that stuff. He does have a book out, Preventable. Again, Dr. Thomas Hemingway. It's an honor and a privilege to have you on, and thanks so much for doing this.
Hey man, the pleasure is mine, Rob. Thanks for having me. It's yeah, so great to be with you and to chat a little bit about these things that are so dang important that are so often ignored. So let's get into it.
So let's talk about this. I mean, the medical industry right now, nurses, doctors, everything in the kitchen sink. A lot of Americans, especially, but even people around the world, do not trust their doctors, their nurses, their, NPs, whoever we want to talk about. They don't trust them anymore. Why do you feel like this is?
Well, hey, I think let's just look at the data. I love to look at data because the data doesn't lie. I mean, we can, as humans, try to interpret the data and spin it. There's lots of spin happening, but the actual data itself doesn't lie. So here's where we've got there. So now today in the world, the top 10 leading causes of death, 7 out of 10 of them are almost entirely preventable. And you're not hearing this from your doctors. Your average doctor is not saying, hey, Rob, did you realize that the 7 out of 10 leading causes of death, you could entirely prevent that with a couple of simple, easy lifestyle practices that I can show you? Do they ever tell you that? They
No.
never tell you that. Number one killer in this country has been for probably close to 100 years, heart disease in men and in women. One person dies every 35 seconds of heart disease. I mean, it's crazy. 700,000 people a year from heart disease alone. 1 in 5 deaths in this country is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer, diabetes and its complications, obesity, kidney disease, lung disease. These things are almost entirely preventable. Yet most doctors don't tell you a word about this. They reach for their prescription pad and be honest, I have compassion for these guys and gals. That's how they were trained. In medical school, you literally have courses after courses of pharmacology. You have courses in pathophysiology. You name a bunch of diseases. You learn the names, and then you learn what the quote unquote treatment is, which is almost always a prescription medication. What you don't learn is how the heck these folks get disease in the first place and how that can actually be prevented. Because if you dig deep and go to the root, almost all of these conditions that are killing us as humanity worldwide, almost all of them are nearly entirely preventable. You know what's crazy, Rob? About 2 decades ago, worldwide hunger was a much bigger issue than it is today. And it still continues to be a problem in certain areas, sub-Saharan Africa, for example. But right now, overtaking by a landslide the problems with hunger worldwide are the issues that are occurring with obesity and type 2 diabetes. This is the leading cause of death worldwide is obesity and its complications, which include heart disease. It includes type 2 diabetes, which is nearly 100% preventable. When I was in medical school, we never saw young kids with type 2 diabetes. Nowadays, 1 in every 3 people in the US has diabetes or pre-diabetes, a third of us. It's just raging out of control. And as far as being overweight in this country, 70% of us are overweight. It's just out of control. Almost 58% are obese. These numbers are just staggering. And yet we as physicians, and I take part of the blame for this, we were not trained to help people to prevent these things. We were taught, here's the pill that you give them once they have diabetes, once they have high blood pressure. We weren't told how to help these people prevent this in the first place. And so that's what I am so passionate about. And I'll tell you here in a moment the reason why. I have 2 decades of experience in medicine. And when I did my training, I never saw 30-year-olds drop dead of heart attacks. In the last decade, more and more, each and every year, I am seeing young people, and I say young, a little bit loosely. I'm 50 next year, Rob. And so I I feel like I'm still really young. When I see guys and gals younger than I that are either dying of a heart attack or having their first time heart attack in their 30s or 40s, I'm going, red light, something should flash right now. The hazard lights in your vehicle, whatever that is, we need to be alerted that this is not normal. This is not right. We have the best possible technology, emergency care. I spent 2 decades in hospitals and ERs helping people in the throes of acute injury and illness, like heart attacks, like stroke, all of these things. And I feel great about what we can do in the emergency setting. But 90% of healthcare dollars are spent in the chronic disease management. And I use the word management because that's what medical folks call it. They call it management, which is sad because we can do better. We can actually prevent this stuff from the root cause analysis, get down to why these things are occurring, and we can prevent it in the first place. And that's where 90% of our healthcare dollars are being spent. And guess what? It's not working, which is exactly what I described with that 7 out of 10 of these leading causes of death are almost entirely preventable. And we're doing next to nothing as a healthcare system to address this. And so that's a travesty.
The problem is that McDonald's and these companies, they get the kids when they're young with the toy. Mommy and daddy get me the toy, and then the food is addictive. So they have these these scientists that are paid by these companies to make the food addictive. So the kid, the parents, they're all eating this food and they're loving it because it tastes great. It's feeding off on our endorphins. And it's like almost like the cocaine. Like I never
Yeah.
had cocaine, but I've been told that if you take cocaine, it's feeding off on that stuff. Is this the issue? Is that food is toxic now for the most part, unless it's organic, pretty much.
Yeah. So here's the thing, Rob. This is one point that I could not belabor enough. So food is either the best possible medicine that you could give your body multiple times a day, or food is a poison. It is a slow poison. You can literally kill yourself with food, and we do it unknowingly so often. And here's the thing, the last couple of years, you mentioned the fast food joints that were going bananas, the alcohol that was being sold that was out of this world, the sales were going up. But also, if you ever went to the grocery store, which most of us did in the last couple of years, the only place you were finding empty aisles of food was in the center of the supermarket, the center of the grocery store, which is where all of the absolute worst foods are located, the highly processed ones. If you went to the periphery where they sell fresh fruits, fresh vegetables,
Right.
well-raised meats and proteins and things like that, I never saw any of that empty. And I was in a small island in the middle of the Pacific. And trust me, when people are out there and they have the fear that the food is going to literally not be there the next week, they buy up everything. And so the center of the store was literally empty for 2 years. What was not empty was the periphery, because people were not buying up the most healthful things that could have supported them, helped them, prevented a lot of the comorbidities and issues that they may have had over the last couple of years, yet they were not reaching for that. The reason for that is exactly what you said. The food companies want us to think that eating, not only at the fast food joint, but eating all of these highly processed foods that are convenient. Let's be honest, if it comes in a bag or a box or with a barcode, you rip that thing open, you shove it in your mouth. You don't have to cook it. You don't have to do anything. It's so easy. It's convenient, but it is literally poisoning you one
Right.
little bit at a time. It is toxic. And so I only tell people, really, Rob, that there's 3 things they need to avoid. It's super simple, because the main food advice that you can take away from this interview is just eat real food. The more diverse, the more colorful, the better. If you have to get it from a bag or a box, or it has a label on it, barcode and nutrition facts, most of those things you should really leave at the grocery store, because they are full of highly processed sugar, number one, the carbohydrates that are super highly processed, the grains and flours that are pulverized, that's number 2, and then what's called the seed oils, which is these highly processed industrialized oils. Like soybean oil is one of the biggest offenders, canola oil, safflower, sunflower, grapeseed, rapeseed, rice bran oil. All of these highly processed oils are literally toxic for your body because they cause inflammation. The first of which, Rob, came out over 100 years ago when Procter and Gamble came out with Crisco. They tried to convince us that Crisco, this white, super, clean looking, beautiful white, lard paste, which was artificial lard, it was vegetable oil, They tried to teach us that was actually better for our bodies. You know what? They actually started making this stuff from the waste products in the cotton industry. Literally, cottonseed oil was one of the first of these industrialized seed oils, and they found basically a use for this otherwise garbage product that they wouldn't even feed animals. And yet they decided to feed it to humans because it took the place of in baking of natural lard, which they tried to demonize, right? Animal fats were the devil. You know, you and I grew up, in the day where we were literally cast this huge shadow over all of the animal fats, whether it be something like butter or lard or grease from bacon, or even just eggs, for example, the cholesterol from eggs. We were told that that was going to kill us from a heart attack.
Yes.
None of that is even true. Those natural fats are actually the ones that are more healthy. It's these highly processed ones that you literally have to take up to super high temperatures. You have to bleach them. You have to use solvents. You have to deodorize them when they're done. And if you ever want to look at something really kind of nasty, gross, and you're like, oh my gosh, I would never eat that again, Google how they make seed oil or canola oil, vegetable oil, for example. The processing that takes place is out of this world crazy, and they literally come to you as rancid oils, yet they look pure and clean and clear in color because they've done all this bleaching, deodorizing, using solvents, using all these crazy chemicals to make them presentable to the human eye when they literally come to us toxic. If we go back 1,000 years or even just 100 years and ask, what were we eating back then? It was real food, right? We didn't have all this highly processed crap. We ate real food. And so that's my one health advice for today is eat real food. Avoid what comes in a bag, a box, or with a barcode, the 3 Bs and those highly processed sugars, flours, grains, and of course, those seed oils. And if you could just do that one thing, your health would dramatically improve. And you'd feel so much better too, because those foods, the real foods, are not inflammatory like the highly processed ones that you're getting from the center of the grocery store or at all those fast food joints that are literally called food deserts. They're high in calories, but very low in nutrition. We are literally starving in a sea of plenty. We are overfed and undernourished, Rob. That's one of the biggest issues of the day.
Oh, there's a lot of doctors retiring right now. And it's in some places it's extremely hard to find a doctor. I'm not talking about specialty doctors, which it's really extremely hard, 6, 10 months, 12 months to even get a hold of some of these people. But the primary care people, they're all retiring. I don't know if they're just all burnt out or if it's a healthcare issue or what the heck it is. You would know more about this. You're in the field. Why are we seeing more doctors retire at this crazy pace? It's extremely fast.
Yeah, it's multifactorial for sure. There's no one issue, but I think a lot of us are very burnt out on the trajectory of healthcare in this country, and many of us feel like we're spinning our wheels, that we're not really able to make the difference that we want to make. And so I would say there's a certain percentage that are just folks that are retiring a little bit earlier. Back when I did my training 25 years ago, it was not uncommon to see physicians practicing into their 70s and 80s. Nowadays, you hit 50 or 60, you're like, I've had enough of this garbage. This is not what I thought it would be. I went out into this field to help people live their best lives. And I just feel like a pill pusher. I feel like a drug dealer. I'm told I have to prescribe medication to people for everything they ask for, whether it be a narcotic, a pharmaceutical for some sort of a brain health issue. I mean, we don't even have time to get into that. But I mean, I think many of the audience might know that literally the whole theory behind antidepressants, this so-called theory of how the neurotransmitters in the brain were low at lower levels, and that's why you needed a so-called selected serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI, was to boost those levels. That was all a fallacy. It was garbage science. Same with the whole Alzheimer's dementia fraud that just recently came out this past year, where we were learning that we hung everything in science on this theory of Alzheimer's disease and the so-called deposits in the brain of amyloid. And guess what? It doesn't pan out. And billions and billions and billions of dollars have been spent on medications to lower amyloid and all this stuff. And it doesn't even work. And you know what does work, Rob, is what we said earlier. It's your diet. It's what you do and what you don't do. Right now in medicine, the thing that you could do to help yourself more than anything, most of it does not involve doctors. It involves paying attention to what you do and you don't do, the so-called epigenetics of health. In other words, all of us were born with a certain DNA, a genetic code, right? We got it from our parents. That is literally less than 10% of what will ultimately manifest into a disease later in life. 90% of it has to do with what choices we make, what kinds of foods we eat, what we don't eat, whether we move our bodies or not, whether we get quality sleep or not, how we manage our stress or not. How, it's just amazing that these factors that are literally under our control are the biggest factors with respect to our health. And most doctors are not paying any attention to this because there's no pill that they can quickly give you and end that patient visit at 4.5 minutes so they can get the next person in the room. They don't have time to talk to you about your lifestyle. How do you make your plate every meal? How many times a day do you eat? What do you put on that plate? Are you sleeping well? Are you getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night? How do you manage your stress? Are you getting your movement in every day? They don't have time to talk to you about these things, which are literally the biggest levers with respect to health, and nobody is paying attention in Western medicine. It's really, really sad.
And I know we're running out of time, but we will have you on again to speak about the book and the podcast. Can you give that a quick plug before we sign off, though?
Yeah, absolutely. So I authored a book entitled Preventable: Five Powerful Practices to Avoid Disease and Build Unshakable Health, because I want these simple tools to be available to anyone and everyone. The tools that I describe in this book are simple, they cost nothing, they are very powerful, and they are doable. So everything that I talk about is not only from my personal experience, but from working with thousands of patients over the last 2 decades. And I've seen significant improvements and even reversal of so many of the diseases out there, including type 2 diabetes, for example, with these simple practices. And the bonus, Rob, is that you wake up each and every day with energy, vitality, zest for life. I mean, dude, I am 50 years old next year, and I'm as active as any teenager or 20-year-old you've ever met. In fact, I know that because I have teenagers and I can keep up with all of them. In fact, I can do more pull-ups than these guys. I can do 30 pull-ups in a row at 50 years of age. And
Wow.
there's not many humans on this earth that can do that
That's
at
good. Yeah.
any age. And I'm doing it at 50. And so the book is out there. It's called Preventable. And my website is thomashemingway.com. The podcast is called Unshakable Health. And every week I either bring on a guest or I do a solo cast, and we do all things health. It can be so many broad and varied topics out there. It's incredible. I just had Dr. Frank Lipman on there. He's nearly 80 years old. And the
Wow.
guy is like the picture of health, Rob. His skin is better than mine, and the dude is almost 80 years old. Maybe it's just too much sun in Hawaii. I don't know, but it's incredible talking to these amazing people. And so, yeah, if people could check that out, Unshakable Health, and thomashemingway.com, or Dr. Thomas Hemingway on Instagram, where I tend to be a little bit more active these days, and grab the book. It's available now. You can pre-order it, and it's got life-changing stuff.
I'm definitely going to subscribe to the podcast when I get off here for sure. Dr. Thomas Hemingway, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
The pleasure was mine, man. Thanks so much for having me on, Rob. Aloha.